Emeka was just 8 years old when his life took a tragic turn. Orphaned after losing both parents in a car accident, he was placed under the care of his Aunt Cecilia, a woman whose heart seemed hardened by years of bitterness. Aunt Cecilia saw Emeka not as a child to be nurtured, but as an extra mouth to feed, a burden she resented. Every morning, Emeka would rise before dawn, his small frame heavy with the knowledge of the day ahead. Aunt Cecilia handed him a tray of plantains and sent him off to the bustling streets. With an empty stomach and worn-out sandals, he would roam the dusty roads, calling out to passers-by in hopes of selling enough to appease his aunt. Hunger gnawed at his belly, and exhaustion was a constant companion. Yet, his spirit remained unbroken, clinging to the faint memory of his parents' warmth and love. At night, when the world grew quiet, Emeka would sneak away to his parents' grave. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could pour out his sorrow and dream of a brighter future. Kneeling before the weathered headstones, he whispered his heart's deepest cries, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Why did you leave me?" he would ask, his voice trembling. Though no answer came, those moments gave him a sliver of solace, a chance to feel close to the parents he missed so dearly. The streets were unkind to a child like Emeka. Each day, he navigated through bustling markets and chaotic traffic, dodging cars and ignoring the sneers of impatient shoppers. The weight of the plantain tray seemed to grow heavier with each step, and the sting of hunger blurred his focus. Yet, Emeka pressed on, his determination fueled by the fear of Aunt Cecilia's wrath if he returned home with unsold goods. Sometimes, kind strangers would buy a plantain or two, offering a word of encouragement or slipping him a coin for himself. These small acts of kindness were rare but deeply cherished, moments of humanity in an otherwise harsh existence. Other times, unscrupulous buyers would cheat him, taking advantage of his innocence. Yet Emeka learned to be resilient, his survival instincts sharpening with every encounter. Despite the hardships, there were moments of fleeting joy. Emeka loved watching the street performers who entertained crowds with their acrobatics and music. For a few precious minutes, he could forget his troubles and lose himself in their artistry. But as soon as the applause faded, reality came crashing back, and he returned to his task, his heart heavy once more. Each day ended the same way, a meager meal, scolding from Aunt Cecilia, and dreams of a better life. Little did Emeka know, the seeds of hope his father had planted long ago were quietly growing, waiting for the right moment to bloom. One stormy evening, while Emeka was at his parents' gravesite, he noticed something unusual. Beside his father's grave was an envelope partially buried in the soil. Curious, he picked it up, finding it weathered but intact. Inside was a handwritten note, signed by his father, referencing an investment he had made before his passing. The note was vague, but it hinted at a future benefit for Emeka when he turned 18. He clutched the paper tightly, unsure of its meaning but feeling a spark of hope ignite within him. That night, for the first time in years, he fell asleep with a sense of purpose. Unbeknownst to Emeka, this note would change his life forever. But for now, it was a secret he kept close to his heart, the silent promise of a better tomorrow. As the years passed, Emeka's resolve only grew stronger. He continued his daily routine of hawking plantains, but now, he carried his father's note with him everywhere he went. It was his talisman, a reminder that his current struggles would not last forever. Though his life remained harsh, Emeka began to see himself not as a victim but as a survivor, someone destined for more. Aunt Cecilia, however, remained unchanged. She continued to berate Emeka, accusing him of being ungrateful and lazy, even when he brought home enough money to meet her demands. Her harsh words cut deep, but Emeka's spirit had grown tougher over time. He began to silently vow that one day, he would rise above her cruelty. On weekends, when the streets were quieter, Emeka would find moments to read discarded newspapers he picked up along his route. Though he had little formal education, he taught himself to recognize letters and words. Slowly, he began to piece together stories about the world beyond his small town, sparking dreams of a life filled with possibilities. The idea of his father's investment became a beacon of hope. Though he didn't fully understand its significance, the thought of it kept him going. Every time he felt like giving up, he would take out the note and reread it, imagining the day when he might finally break free from his hardships. One fateful day, as Emeka was hawking plantains near the town's central market, he met a kind-hearted teacher named Mrs. Ifeoma. She noticed the boy's worn appearance and curious eyes and stopped to speak with him. "What's your name, young man?" she asked gently. "My name is Emeka," he replied, shy but polite. Mrs. Ifeoma bought a few plantains and asked Emeka about his life. Though hesitant at first, he eventually shared bits of his story, including his dreams of a better future and the mysterious note from his father. Mrs. Ifeoma was moved by Emeka's resilience and determination. She offered to teach him basic reading and writing during her free time, a gesture that left Emeka overwhelmed with gratitude. For the first time, he felt seen and valued by someone outside his family. True to her word, Mrs. Ifeoma began tutoring Emeka after her classes. She brought him books, paper, and pencils, opening a new world of knowledge to him. With each lesson, Emeka's confidence grew, and so did his hope. Though his life was still filled with hardship, he now had an ally and a path forward. Under Mrs. Ifeoma's guidance, Emeka's mind began to blossom. Lessons that once seemed daunting now excited him. He mastered the basics of reading and writing, and soon he was devouring books that Mrs. Ifeoma lent him. Each story opened a door to a world far beyond his own, fueling his imagination and ambition. Mrs. Ifeoma also taught Emeka about values like kindness, integrity, and perseverance. "Education is your ladder," she often said. "With it, you can climb out of any hole life puts you in." These words resonated deeply with Emeka, and he held onto them like a lifeline. As weeks turned into months, Emeka's progress became evident. He began to dream bigger, imagining a future where he could use his knowledge to create a better life not just for himself but for others as well. He promised himself that if he ever found success, he would help children like him who were struggling to survive. Even Aunt Cecilia noticed the change in him. Though she rarely acknowledged his efforts, she could see the fire in his eyes. Her scolding grew less frequent, and for once, Emeka began to feel a sense of peace at home. He knew he still had a long road ahead, but for the first time, he felt like he was truly on his way. Emeka's nights at his parents' grave became less about sorrow and more about gratitude. He thanked them for the note his father had left and for the chance encounter with Mrs. Ifeoma. Little did he know, his journey was only just beginning. As Emeka continued to excel in his studies, Mrs. Ifeoma introduced him to a community library in the town. It was a modest building with shelves lined with books, but to Emeka, it was a treasure trove. He spent every spare moment there, immersing himself in stories about science, history, and distant lands. The library became his second home and a place where his dreams began to take more tangible shape. One afternoon, as he flipped through a book about successful entrepreneurs, an idea struck him. What if he could one day start a business of his own? The thought thrilled and intimidated him, but the seed was planted. Emeka resolved to learn everything he could about the world of business, even if it seemed like an impossible goal for a boy in his circumstances. Mrs. Ifeoma noticed the change in Emeka's demeanor. "You've been very focused lately," she observed with a smile. When he shared his newfound dream with her, she beamed with pride. "You can do it, Emeka. It won't be easy, but with determination and the right knowledge, you can achieve anything." Her words became another source of strength for him. Meanwhile, Aunt Cecilia grew wary of Emeka's increasing independence. She saw him spending less time hawking plantains and more time at the library, which sparked arguments at home. "You're wasting time with those books," she scolded. But Emeka stood firm, refusing to let her negativity deter him. With Mrs. Ifeoma's encouragement and the library's resources, Emeka began sketching out his vision for the future. He knew he still had many hurdles to overcome, but for the first time, he could see a path forward, a path that might one day lead him to fulfill his father's legacy and create a better life for himself. As Emeka worked tirelessly to balance his studies and hawking plantains, he began facing new challenges that tested his resolve. The more time he spent at the library or with Mrs. Ifeoma, the more Aunt Cecilia's resentment grew. She often criticized him for neglecting his duties and accused him of dreaming beyond his station. "Books won't put food on this table," she sneered one evening as Emeka returned home from the library. "Your head is full of useless fantasies." Her words stung, but Emeka remained quiet, determined not to let her negativity overshadow his ambitions. Meanwhile, his peers at the market began to notice his absences and mocked him for his efforts to learn. "Are you trying to be a professor, Emeka?" one boy jeered. "You're just a hawker like the rest of us." Though their words hurt, they also fueled his determination to prove them wrong. At the library, Emeka found solace and support. Mrs. Ifeoma encouraged him to stay focused and introduced him to books about perseverance and resilience. "Great things take time, Emeka," she reminded him. "The road to success is never easy, but every step you take brings you closer to your goal." Over time, Emeka learned to block out the negativity around him and channel his energy into his studies. He began creating a journal where he wrote down his dreams and plans, sketching out the life he envisioned for himself. Each entry was a reminder of his potential and a testament to his unwavering spirit. Despite the hardships, Emeka's progress continued. With each book he read and every lesson he learned, he felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead. His patience and perseverance were tested daily, but he refused to give up. Deep down, he knew that his father's legacy and his own dreams were worth fighting for. One day, while Emeka was studying at the library, a community leader named Mr. Ade noticed the young boy's diligence. Mr. Ade was a retired businessman who occasionally volunteered at the library to mentor young people. Intrigued by Emeka's focus, he struck up a conversation with him. "What are you working on so intently, young man?" Mr. Ade asked, peering at Emeka's notes. "I'm learning about business," Emeka replied shyly. "I want to start my own someday." Impressed by Emeka's determination, Mr. Ade decided to take him under his wing. He began teaching Emeka the basics of entrepreneurship, from managing finances to understanding market demand. Mr. Ade also shared stories of his own struggles and successes, encouraging Emeka to stay persistent. Under Mr. Ade's guidance, Emeka's confidence grew even further. He started applying the principles he learned to his plantain business, finding ways to attract more customers and improve his profits. For the first time, Emeka began to see the fruits of his labor, and the small victories motivated him to dream even bigger. Through Mr. Ade, Emeka was introduced to other community leaders who were equally impressed by his ambition. They pooled resources to help him attend workshops and seminars, where he gained more knowledge and connections. These opportunities opened new doors for Emeka, showing him that his dreams were not only possible but within reach. Though his journey was far from over, Emeka felt a renewed sense of purpose. With the support of his mentors and his unwavering determination, he knew he was on the path to transforming his life. The glimmer of opportunity had ignited a flame within him, one that would continue to burn brightly as he worked toward his goals. With renewed vigor, Emeka took a bold step toward his dreams by launching his first small venture, a stall where he sold roasted plantains and other snacks. Armed with the skills and strategies taught by Mr. Ade, he worked tirelessly to make his business a success. However, the road was far from smooth. At first, Emeka faced fierce competition from other vendors. Some were skeptical of his youth and dismissed his stall as a passing phase. Others deliberately undercut his prices to drive him out of business. To make matters worse, unexpected expenses arose, depleting the modest savings he had managed to accumulate. Emeka's resolve was tested as he struggled to stay afloat. One particularly challenging day, a heavy rainstorm ruined much of his stock, leaving him with significant losses. As he sat under a makeshift canopy, watching the rain pour down, doubt crept into his heart. Maybe Aunt Cecilia was right, he thought. Maybe I'm just chasing an impossible dream. But Emeka's mentors refused to let him give up. Mr. Ade reminded him of the importance of resilience. Every entrepreneur faces setbacks, he said. It's how you respond to them that defines your success. Mrs. Ifeoma also encouraged him, pointing out how far he had come despite the odds. Inspired by their words, Emeka devised a plan to recover. He diversified his offerings, adding more affordable snacks to attract a wider range of customers. He also negotiated with suppliers to buy ingredients in bulk at lower prices, improving his profit margins. Slowly but surely, his efforts paid off, and his stall began to thrive. Though the journey was arduous, each challenge strengthened Emeka's determination. He learned to adapt, innovate, and persevere, skills that would serve him well as he continued to build his future. Little did he know, his breakthrough was just around the corner.